So, we're always keeping an eye out for the big shifts, in energy and how it all works, right? And this week you sent me some reports that really caught my eye
Yeah.
about Brookfield Asset Management. And it looks like they might be on the verge of buying Colonial Pipeline.
Yeah, Colonial Pipeline.
It makes you
A
think
big one.
it makes you think about all the ways we depend on fuel in our daily lives, right?
Absolutely. And this is a major development potentially.
Yeah.
Just to kind of wrap your head around the scale of this. We're talking Colonial Pipeline is the largest pipeline system in the US.
Wow.
It stretches 5,500 miles from Houston all the way to New York Harbor.
Oh, wow.
And every single
It's a
day,
long way.
it moves over 100 million gallons of fuel.
Gosh.
We're talking gasoline, jet fuel, diesel, heating oil. Like, think about how much of the country relies on that flow of fuel.
It's the kind of thing that you don't really think about until there's a problem.
Yeah.
And this potential sale, and we're hearing it could be for over $9 billion,
Yeah, big money.
including debt,
Huh?
follows an auction process
It's been a while.
with a really interesting mix of current owners.
Are
Right?
his.
So who are these sellers? Like,
Yeah.
what's the breakdown?
Well, it's fascinating when you look at the current ownership structure of Colonial Pipeline because it really highlights the diversity of players in this space.
Right.
You've got CDPQ, which is the Canadian Pension Fund, and they tend to make these very long-term investments, often in infrastructure, and those align well with something like a pipeline.
Right.
And then, of course, you have Shell, a major energy producer.
Right.
And then you've got these big investment firms, KKR and IFM investors, are also in the mix.
So you've got kind of a mix of, pension funds and energy giants.
Yeah.
And these big investment firms.
And then you can't forget Koch Industries.
Right.
They actually hold the largest single stake in the pipeline, and they've been involved for the longest.
So it's an interesting mix, and it makes you think about
Yeah.
what their different priorities are.
Yeah.
Like why would they even be thinking about selling now?
Well, that's a great question, and it's probably different for each of them, right? So for a pension fund like CDPQ, it could just be, that the timing is right for their long-term investment strategy.
Okay.
They've held it long enough, and it's time to realize some of those gains.
Makes sense.
For energy companies like Shell, they might be looking at their portfolio and saying, okay, we want to focus our capital on other parts of the energy sector.
Okay.
Maybe renewable energy or something else, right?
Right.
And then for the investment firms, it could just be, it's a good time to cash out. The market's right. They've made a good return.
Okay, so let's talk about the potential buyer,
Yeah,
Brookfield Asset Management. So they're an asset manager, right?
they are. Yeah.
So does that mean that they're not really focused on the energy production itself?
Right.
But more on the financial performance, the long-term value of the pipeline itself?
That's a really key point. Asset managers like Brookfield, they typically view infrastructure as these stable long-term investments.
Okay.
And their priority really revolves around optimizing that asset for financial returns, right?
Right.
And that could have some implications for, how the pipeline is operated in the future and what kind of investments they make in it.
Yeah, the timeline for this whole deal is also really interesting to me. Like, we first started hearing rumblings about this back in June.
Right. It's been a while.
And then in early March, it seemed like Brookfield was emerging as kind of the front runner.
Yeah.
But now it sounds like they're actually getting close to announcing something.
Could be any day now.
Yeah, so this whole process really underscores how complex and how valuable an asset like this is, right?
Absolutely. And a deal of this size, it involves a lot of due diligence, a lot of regulatory hurdles they have to jump through. So the fact that it's taken this long, just really speaks to the importance and the complexity of transferring ownership of something like this.
So I guess the question for our listeners is like, why should you care about this? Why is this important?
Yeah, and I think the key takeaway here is that the ownership of something as critical as Colonial Pipeline, it can really have these ripple effects across the entire energy landscape.
Right.
So think about the implications for investment in future energy transportation projects and the potential impact on the fuel supply itself, right? The fuel that powers our economy.
Yeah, and it's kind of a reminder that there are these huge financial players and decisions happening behind the scenes that really affect how we get the energy that powers our lives.
Right, and connecting this to the bigger picture, the priorities of an asset management firm might be different from those of the previous owners.
Hmm.
So it raises this really important question about how this kind of essential infrastructure is going to be managed and developed going forward. What kind of investments are they going to prioritize under this new ownership?
It really makes you think about, all the financial currents that are underpinning something as simple as, getting gas in your car.
Yeah, it's not something you think about every day, but
Yeah, it's important.
it's all connected.
So yeah, I think this is a story that we're going to continue to follow, right?
Definitely.
And it's something to keep in mind as you see more headlines about it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for breaking it down
Yeah, of course.
for us.
Happy to do it.
And we'll keep an eye on this one.
For sure. Thanks. Take care.